Hello and welcome to this ChinnyRant. Chinny conversation, for it is a day, less than a day in fact, after the Pinball Dreams CPC video has been released, and it turns out I've upset a certain section of CPC fans, because what I said in the video, and I stand by this, is the CPC has no hardware scrolling. Now, this is a channel that gives the CPC a fair crack of the whip. I'm a CPC owner, have been since 1985. I always used to get annoyed with magazines like CMVG that would just basically paid lip service to the CPC because it gave them sold a few extra magazines, but they didn't really care for it. And that was always frustrating, and people getting things wrong about the CPC. And sometimes you saw games that were badly ported from the Spectrum, lazy porting. Sometimes you played good games that we now know with modern techniques could have been better. And sometimes you saw amazing games that did amazing things, even if they were budget games, like a Killer Cobra by Richard Applin, which has really fast horizontal scrolling that shouldn't be possible, but is, because he knew his stuff. I'm going to get myself in trouble again, so this is my best understanding of it, and I've had to go back and check this stuff because at times this afternoon I thought I was going nuts being told stuff. Now, the CPC has a limited hardware support, but not in the way for scrolling, but not in the way that perhaps C64 or Amiga or console owners or other machine owners would expect, or even CPC Plus owners. These machines can move the screen in 8 directions, throw things around, no problem at all with minimal CPU intervention. They've got custom chips to do that. The CPC has its CRT-C chip, and the use of that is documented in the Amstrad firmware guide, which Amstrad provided back in the day, soft 9 something. I should know this stuff. I cannot remember, and actually I don't really care. It has a scrolling effect that perhaps you will have seen in certain games. I was playing Rig Attack last night, and when you got to the side of the screen, it moved really, really quickly, but everything stopped, and then you scrolled a full screen width, and then you carried on. That's one of the kinds of hardware scrolling the CPC has. It's very limited in horizontal movements. I believe it's certainly a little bit more flexible vertically moving, and some of the modes used aren't single pixel. I think they use 8 pixels on some of them. Roamed in the Caves, I think, uses it, but again, it's not hardware scrolling as you would be familiar with it, where on the Mega Drive with Sonic 2, where that screen's being thrown around at 50 or 60 hertz in all 8 directions. It's a very limited thing, and you have to know how to use it. Additionally, there are techniques for getting more out of the CRT-C chip, but they are undocumented things. One of the people said to me on YouTube, yes, well, by the early 1990s, all the coders knew this stuff, and games like Super Cauldron used these effects, and Prehistoric too. And you're thinking, yes, these are the techniques the demo coders discovered. Was it Log-On Systems, the French guys, and all these other people that filtered their way through to the final CPC games. And none of this stuff was in the firmware manual. These were all not unofficial hack. Well, yes, they are really, because they're exploits, they're hacks, they're things the CPC shouldn't be able to do, but can via the CRT-C chip. Now, if you've played Prehistoric 2, for example, and you load it up, you go through a load of bump before you start about what CPC you have, and then there's a load of stuff where you've got to line up the screen exactly. And the reason for that is because Amstrad used to buy CRT-C chips from different manufacturers. They're different revisions, right? And with different revisions, you get different results. So what Prehistoric 2 and some of the other games that do this were doing were checking which version of the CRT-C you had so they could take advantage of the exploits there. to get you all these fancy things. Now, can you imagine back in 87 if Ocean had released a game using these tricks? You would have had to go through all of that. That would have confused people. Remember lens lock? How many people got confused by that? Lining things up. And then if you sold 50,000 games, and even if 5% of people can't load it, there's a load of calls to Ocean saying, my game doesn't work. But worse, if you use some of these exploits, hacks, whatever you call them, techniques, and Amstrad in 1987, and Amstrad bring out another revision of the CPC with another revision or type of CRTC chip, potentially everything stops working. So you end up with a situation like, the CPC Plus. When people used undocumented features in the CPC, they found that the game stopped working on the CPC Plus because it's undocumented, right? So Amstrad have got their design documents. They know what's documented, and they know what address spaces and things they can use for the new bits in the Plus. Suddenly those things aren't available. Amiga 1200 going from the 500 and 600. Same thing. Christmas 1992. I got a Robocop 3 and another game, sim game. Was it Train? Something with trains. Can't remember. Railway Tycoon, possibly. Something like that. I can't remember. Anyway, those games didn't work, even if you held down both mouse buttons and turned the CPU caches off and turned it back to ECS, whatever original chipset or whatever you used to have to do. Still didn't work, because presumably those games also used undocumented features. So nothing could... As soon as you start doing that, you risk future hardware being locked out. Whereas with Prehistoric 2, with Super Cauldron, with Zap to Balls, at the end of the CPC's life, the CPC's dead. Amstrad aren't producing it anymore. They've stopped producing it in 1991. So there's going to be no more revisions of the chips out there. So you can use all of those exploits and things and all little techniques and hacks you've found to do really good stuff, like in Zap to Balls, like in Cauldron 3, like Prehistoric 2, and like in Pinball Dreams. This stuff is now available to you because effectively the hardware is locked down. It's not going to change anymore. And I assume Pinball Dreams has some kind of CRTC auto-detect routine. It goes, right, which version have you got in your CPC? And I will adjust myself to work for that. I could be wrong. I could be making more CPC users angry, but I'm guessing there's probably some kind of thing in there that makes sure they get the hacks for the double buffered scrolling they've got going. And the thing is, right, and what really annoys me is the hardware scrolling thing. What you're trying to do in this review, when you're trying to say how impressive this game is, what you're trying to say is the CPC, as it left Amstrad, as it was documented, as it officially runs, shouldn't be able to do any of this. It's impossible. It shouldn't be able to do it. If you took that back to 1984, showed that to the guys at Amstrad, Roland Perry, Medge, all those other people, go, we've done this, their jaws are going to be on the floor. They're not going to know how you've done it. There used to be little articles written by Cliff Lawson in Amstrad Computer User telling you stuff about Mode 3 and how to do split screen stuff and all this clever stuff that were kind of little hacks of the CRTC that perhaps hadn't been documented that well at the launch of the CPC, but they knew were there and were available to use. But they'd be blown away by this stuff going on. It's like with the Amstrad PCW. The PCW really shouldn't be able to run games like Batman and Tomahawk because the entire display is optimized for text. Amstrad did that so they could do really fast scrolling and how it's optimized. And apparently when the first game to come out that used graphics was Batman, the original Batman game by Ocean. And according to one of the Amstrad magazines, and it may have been ACU, apparently that game went into Amstrad and the designers of the PCW couldn't believe it had been done because it was thought to be so difficult as to be, to do that when the system has been completely designed to do the opposite, to throw text around and not really be able to throw games graphics around. They were amazed. And this is the same case with Pinball Dreams. CPC shouldn't be able to do this stuff. A lot of this stuff isn't documented. A lot of this stuff is people prodding around in CRTC, looking at the spec documents and going, oh, this might be possible, and then combining that CRTC with the hardware inside the CPC. It's a combination of over 30 years of knowledge. And it all begins in the early 90s with log-on systems and with all those demo guys who were doing really clever stuff, getting lots of colours on screen. That was just the beginning of it. I do stand by that original statement, no matter how much is going to upset people, because for every other computer user who isn't an Amstrad coding expert, in effect, the CPC doesn't have what everybody else understands to be hardware scrolling. It has a limited hardware scrolling, and games don't use it because it's difficult and it has limitations, and it out the box, and it just can't. It's not very flexible. Some games can use it. Boulder Dash uses it, but it's really not flexible. And these additional hacks they've found since they're for games like Star Saber, you've got to take your hat off, because what you're making out when you say hardware scrolling is it can do all this 8-way scrolling, blah, 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 off the shelf. It can't. You are using very limited features, a huge amount of brain power, and 30 years of knowledge to achieve something that really shouldn't be possible. So I am sorry if anyone's upset with what I said, but this channel really tries to give the CPC a fair crack of the whip. And if we start saying things like, well, the CPC does have hardware scrolling, people are then going to go, so what? Oh, no one could really be bothered back in the day. Clearly all the Amstrad games were so rubbish, but look, they can do pinball. They could have all been like Pinball Dreams. They could have all been like that. And that's really not a route we should be going down. In addition, if the CPC really does have hardware scrolling as we understand it, then why did Amstrad build that proper functionality into the ASIC in the Pluses and the GX4000? In short, get over yourselves, please. Try and see what this channel does. Try and see how we actually do give the CPC a fair crack of the whip. One of the only multi-format channels that does that. I've got a huge love and respect for the machine. I'm blown away by what these guys have done. And all you're doing is taking away from what has been done. Just say, well, yeah, the CPC's kind of got hardware scrolling, but it's completely useless in effect, and these guys have achieved a miracle. Do not say, well, yeah, the CPC's got hardware scrolling, so what? We're all on the same side here. Please stop complaining and just enjoy the marvel of Pinball Dreams on the CPC. It's a brilliant achievement.